On research methods for collecting data, you got a couple different ways you can do it. You could do it in a lab, or you could do it through naturalistic observation. In the lab, there's drawbacks to each one. There's positives to each one. In the lab, participants know they're being studied, so they may behave differently compared to being in a natural environment. For kids, they may feel weird about doing an experiment, but if you just watch them in their natural environment, you may be able to pick up on things. But if you're just going to observe in their natural environment, you can't really control things. You can't control like an independent variable very well. And so they give an example of a naturalistic observation. What they did was they watched parents who took their kids to a science museum, and the parents who took a boy to the science museum, they were way more likely to explain the things that were going on at the science museum compared to if their child was a girl. And I mean, it was a huge difference. And it's really sad, the idea that because of the gender, you are going to treat these kids differently, and you're going to explain scientific concepts more to a boy than you are to a girl. And that's, it could be tragic for some girls. This difference, this gender difference occurred regardless if it was the father or the mother or both parents. So it's like an ingrained thing for parents to do this. Anyways, this is an example of like a naturalistic observation. Some other ways you can do research methods: surveys. You could conduct them over the phone, through the mail. This would be if you're trying to get something like a count of something, descriptive statistics, like how many parents spank their kids. You'd send out a survey for that. It's just a number that you're getting there. A drawback for surveys is participants, they think they might answer in ways that they think are socially desirable. So they're not going to maybe tell you what they truly believe, but they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. And then standardized tests. This is another way. It's a uniform procedures for administration and scoring. And you can compare someone's performance to someone else's performance by doing these standardized tests. They do not always predict behavior in a non-test situation. There's a lot of variability for personality and intelligence that's not maybe going to be picked up on a standardized test. A couple other research methods: case study. So this is an in-depth look at a single individual. Like if you're wanting to study some people like serial killers, you might see a case study on a serial killer where they try to get in depth into, how they became who they are, like Kaczynski that we've talked about now a couple different times. There's physiological measurements. This could be blood samples, cortisol, hormones, neuroimaging, fMRIs, things of this nature. As an example, here's 2 brain images on how alcohol can affect the adolescent's brain here. And you can read through this if you'd like. So that's the research methods on these designs. So you could have what's called descriptive research, where you're basically just getting a number. You're observing and recording a behavior, like the number of times a kid gets spanked. That would be descriptive research. You're describing something that's happening out there. Correlational research, though, is looking at least 2 variables, and you're trying to see if those 2 variables are connected. You've probably heard this phrase before, I hope anyways. Correlation does not mean causation. So just because 2 things are correlated, it does not necessarily mean that one causes the other. And so an example they give here is that permissive parenting increases, self-control for the child decreases. So you could say permissive parenting causes children's lack of self-control. You could say that, but it's not necessarily going to be true. It could be the exact other way. It could be that the child has a low self-control and the parent gives up and they just become a permissive parent. Even more profound than that is it could be like a third variable, maybe like a genetic tendencies or something of that nature. So there's all these different things when you're looking at a correlation that it is not well controlled. And so all you are looking at when you say you have a correlational statement is that these 2 things are related in some way. Now, if you wanted to try to show causation, then you're going to want to run an experiment. So this is going to be carefully regulated procedure where you're controlling an independent variable to see if there's an effect on the dependent variable. The independent variable is the manipulated factor. The dependent variable is the change in response to that manipulation of the independent variable. An experimental group is the group that is being exposed to the experimental manipulation, and then the control group is the one that is not. And then you are going to compare those 2 groups. On the cross-sectional, so this would be where you would take groups of people at different times in their lives and compare them to each other. So if you took like 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and 11-year-olds and you compared them to their test scores on something. That would be cross-sectional. If you do longitudinal, you are looking at the same people over the lifespan. So you would measure the same kid at 5 and 8 and 11. And so if you want to look at the research methods and theories, figure 17 kind of goes into that. Maybe it'll help you. If that didn't make sense, maybe this chart will help you a little bit. The last thing, just very briefly on conducting ethical research. If you would like to read through this, feel free. It does talk about informed consent, confidentiality, debriefing, and deception. So I'll let you read through those. And that is it for chapter 1. Again, chapter 1 is kind of an overview. When we get into chapter 2, we'll get into a little bit more of the meat of the material. All right. Thank you very much for listening.